Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Hawks Firm Room podcast, hosted by yours truly, David Lee, aka DLee43. Please make sure you like, subscribe, share the podcast anywhere you see fit. Man, an electric win for the Hawks last night came down to a buzzer-beating Euro step from Levert off of a Dyson Daniels steal from Desmond Bane, who was having an incredible game. It was one of those games where it's like truly defined by runs, I feel like, in both the second and the fourth quarter. And so I'm really excited to talk about it with my guy Parker. How you doing today, man?
I'm doing all right, For the Memphis Grizzlies, it was their third straight game losing off a game winner. Two of them being at the buzzer, pretty much. And I want to say Sean Coleman looked up a stat reference where it was the first time since 2002 from the Seattle Supersonics where a team lost on 3 straight game winners. So it's rough, but you know what? It's all right. At the end of the day, there's another game tomorrow. You can't harp on the loss too much. So yeah, doing good. Thank you for having me on. I'm excited to talk about Grizzlies and Hawks.
Of course. The great thing for the Grizzlies too is you guys have a lot of breathing room. The West is. It feels like everyone's had a turn at the second seed this year, right? So now the Lakers are up there. I think you and Houston were up there at some point.
Mm-hmm.
But this is the first time all season you guys have lost 3 in a row. So it's hilarious because I saw Chris Vernon losing his mind on like his radio show over the last 2 losses. And like one thing I'm trying to sort of push on this podcast and like it's just trying to be more focused on process than results, right?
Yeah.
And so I thought from your guys' perspective, the process at certain parts throughout the game, just like the Hawks, super clean. That third quarter, ball was popping. Luke Kennard was getting open. Lots of second chance opportunities. Jalen Wells had himself a really impressive night as well. And so I think sometimes it comes down to those last, when it comes down to the clutch, variance will take over sometimes. And momentum, I think sometimes people may think momentum isn't as big of a player in basketball. I think definitely in the clutch where the team is rolling a little bit. Levert went 7 of 8 in the fourth quarter. We'll definitely talk about him a little bit. I think it ultimately just came down to the Hawks went on a hell of a run, and they showed a lot of grit, but I don't think any of it was necessarily an indictment on the Grizzlies, besides maybe the turnovers. So I definitely will ask you a little bit about that. But without further ado, I've got to give some flowers to Zaccharie Risacher, who I know that a lot of Hawks fans in general are sort of frustrated with the short leash he gets, right? So he played the third most minutes of any Hawks tonight. But he only played 7 minutes in the fourth quarter, right? He didn't close. He had 27 points, 5 3-pointers made, 4 steals. He's the third youngest player in NBA history to have at least 14 points and 4 steals in a half. So he had a really great start to the game. He continued to play really well. Had 9 in the third quarter. He had some contested layups over Zach Edey. He hit some movement threes. And I think that Hawks fans in particular were a little bit confused why Terrence Mann closed over him with the way that he was playing. And hopefully when we take a look at the film, you can see some of the things that Terrence Mann brings. Mm-hmm. But I thought with the way that Risacher was playing, one thing that Quinn has said is like, he really appreciates the guys who can come in and out of the lineup, right? So Garrison Matthews hasn't played in over a month. He came in, had an impact. He's toggling Dominic Barlow in and out of the lineup, Keaton Wallace, like guys who have been a big part of our system in the G League and are now getting some more additional reps on the bigger level. So I think it's almost a strength and a curse. And this is where I think this is one of many similarities between Atlanta and Memphis. You guys have so much depth. John Conchar, don't give me. I don't think he's played much right this season.
He has not. No, he has technically been, technically got a little bit promoted because Marvin Bagley is now the 15th man, but John Conchar has essentially been the 15th guy this year.
Yeah, so like John hasn't played a ton this year. He ended up playing against the Hawks. He's always shot the ball pretty well against us, but it's very fascinating to me that like these teams can have so much depth and then also try and figure out who do you play in certain stretches. Like Gigi Jackson and Vince Williams came back and they were instantly parts of the rotation again. So from my perspective, Risacher, with the way that I think other things too, like I think coaches have a better feel for momentum than of course us as fans do, right? So with the way that unit was playing with Karis LeVert and Terrence Mann, my assumption is that Quinn stuck with those guys because they were playing well, and they ended up going on a 19-6 run to close out the game. What was your thoughts on Zaccharie Risacher? Were you a little bit perplexed that he was on the floor to close in the fourth?
So honestly, when it came to the fourth, I really wasn't focused on who the Hawks had. I was more focused on like, hey,
Yeah, that's fair.
Why aren't the Grizzlies scoring right now? Because the
Yeah.
Hawks just kind of kept chipping away.
Mhm.
I want to say they scored Grizzlies only scored like one basket in the final 4 minutes.
Yeah.
So I was kind of just, getting nervous, like trying to be like, all right, well, the Sleets chipping away after they built like an 11-point lead in the fourth quarter.
Yeah.
So I was more concerned about that, but no, I was always when studying the draft, I was like, okay, I felt like Risacher is kind of getting too. I think he was getting crapped on a little too much because he's not your
Mhm.
number one pick. But like when you look at what who he is and what the Hawks needed, like not only was he like really like the perfect fit next to Trae Young because like what Trae Young needs is he needs big 3-and-D wings around him.
Yeah.
Like, but also Zaccharie Risacher needs a guy like Trae Young because
Yep.
it is just mind-boggling the amount of open looks that Trae Young creates.
Yep.
Because when he gets downhill, for one, he doesn't really need a screen. Once he gets downhill, if the defense collapses, he can make any pass on the basketball floor. It doesn't matter where the rotation's coming from, where that open man is coming from. He's gonna find him, and a lot of them was these movement threes or these corner threes, and Risacher capitalized. That was my first time seeing Risacher in person. He was very impressive. But yeah, I mean, with closing, it's one of those things too. Like the Hawks, they also don't have any incentive to tank because they don't have their pick. It's owed to San Antonio, but they're also in the thick of the play-in right now. I think after last night's win, they're a half game behind Orlando for 8 and a game and a half behind Miami for 7. And both those teams are kind of free-falling a little bit, so they have incentive to win. So Snyder went with veterans with Levert and Terrence Mann. I don't blame them. Like you said, Karis LeVert got hot. And I think with Terrence Mann, too, he's kind of that he's a feisty defender, but also too, I think one thing that I don't know if it's totally taken into account, but him and Luke Kennard were teammates with the Clippers. So Mann obviously knew the scouting report, KYP, know your personnel, and he stayed home on Kennard instead of leaving to help to leave him open for 3. So, well, yeah, no. Bottom line, I was very impressed watching Zaccharie Risacher. I think he has a bright future. Like, granted, he's not going to be that franchise-changing number 1 pick, but when you're talking about a guy that can impact winning, I mean, at the end of the day, 6'10" wings that can shoot and defend don't grow on trees at all.
Yeah.
And Risacher is one of them. So that's kind of where I stand.
Yeah, I think that's definitely a fair assessment. And I think one thing that I wasn't necessarily enthused with the pick at first. I was married to Sar, but when I let it settle in, it's like, okay, this is the style of basketball they want to play. They want to lead in the versatility. They want to lead at the size and skill on the wing. And those guys come at a premium in today's NBA too. Like you see how much New York is paying for OG and Mikal Bridges. And those are guys that you hopefully Zaccharie Risacher can grow into, right? So I think that was their approach for sure. What about before I ask you that, what did you think about like his size relative to the Grizzlies? Like, did he seem bigger or smaller than you would expect?
I definitely noticed for sure. I mean, the Grizzlies are rather small on the wing. I mean, Bane and Kennard were really kind of running the one last night, but I mean, Jalen Wells is actually like a big wing. Go and look at pictures of him next to like Jaren Jackson Jr. and it's like, oh, wait a minute, he's actually like not dwarfed by Jaren Jackson Jr. It's a big wing. Gigi Jackson, he's 6'9". Vince Williams, he's listed at like 6'5", 6'6", but he looks more like 6'6", 6'7". Just one of those like just kind of look like Risacher definitely looked like a big wing, but I don't think it was one of those things that it's like, oh wow, he's like towering over the Grizzlies' wings or anything.
Okay. And then from your perspective, who would you want to highlight from Memphis last night?
From Memphis, I mean, it's tough. Actually, I guess the thing I'll kind of like lump these in together and
Mm-hmm.
say um Zach Edey, Brandon Clark, because one thing I kind of noticed in Taylor Jenkins went to in the first half is there was a stretch where so both teams started, it was Edey versus Okongwu, and then
Yeah.
Clark versus Capella.
Yeah.
Capella was owning on the offensive boards. So then in the first half, Jenkins had Edey mirror Capella's minutes, and then Clark mirror Okongwu's minutes. Because obviously Okongwu is going to come up more for ball screens. He's going to be more pick and roll actions,
Yeah.
a little bit bouncier, more athletic and quicker. Match that with Brandon Clark. And, I think for both players, and then that rotation was kind of thrown off at the beginning of the second because both teams went back with their starters, but it kind of rounded back into that form later.
Mm.
But for Zach Edey, 15-5, 6-8 from the field. Brandon Clark, 11-7, 5-7 from the field, 4 offensive rebounds. I like what those two brought, especially like without Jaren Jackson Jr. Because one of the
Yep.
things that with Brandon Clark, awesome basketball player, one of my favorite Grizzly players that I've ever watched. But he's a player whose production relies on Jaren Jackson Jr. rather heavily. How good he is tied to Jaren Jackson Jr. and how bad he is a product of him not being on the floor. And I thought he did a really good job providing a lot of energy on the interior to kind of spur some momentum. Because I mean, dude, the energy was really low. Obviously, the defense has been horrible since I want to say it's like 27th or 28th since the All-Star break, but also too it's their third game in 4 nights, and especially third game in 4 nights at home when after a weekend doubleheader, just the energy in the building just wasn't there. So Clark was a guy trying to bring that juice, but and I think probably the biggest thing too with last night and kind of in relation to both those guys is Taylor Jenkins was relying on Zach Edey in the closing moments where it's like, it's a really big risk to take at this juncture of his career because right now ball handlers salivate at the idea of getting Zach Edey in the pick and roll. That's no secret. I think he has moments where he does well, but his bad moments are bad. I want to say there was one play against New York where Jalen Brunson got him in a high ball screen and walked into a 3 essentially. But I thought he had some pretty good moments. I think there was a late block on Trae Young where Trae Young, I want to say it was Kennard, he beat, and then Zach Edey rotated over, blocked the shot. And then Zach Edey came up for a high pick and roll and just thundered down the lane for a dunk. I think that was like one of their only dunks in the clutch. There was another one where I don't think it led to a bucket. I think Desmond Bane missed a shot, but he had excellent screen contact to get Dyson Daniels off of Desmond Bane. So it's like, okay, this is great. I think these reps for him closing games would be big because he hasn't really closed games this year because Taylor Jenkins can say, hey, we're going to go Jaren Jackson Jr. or Brandon Clark or Jaren Jackson Jr. Santi Aldama, who, by the way, didn't play last night, but Santi Aldama has been absolutely awesome this year.
Yeah, he's been great.
Should be a 6 Man of the Year candidate. Should be getting paid this summer, but he's been their 4th best player this year, and that is he doesn't look out of place as their 4th best player either. But I liked that adjustment to kind of cross match against players who have similar skill sets with Edey, Capella, and Clark and Okongwu. I like the production that they brought, especially losing Jaren Jackson Jr. on the interior. But obviously, everyone's now holding their breath, making sure that Jaren Jackson Jr.'s injury isn't too significant. Not only because the Grizzlies, everyone always talks about Ja Morant's their best player. Well, Jaren Jackson Jr. might be their best player, and also in terms of the fact that it's like the difference between the Grizzlies with Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor than off is massive. And So obviously you're holding your breath there because the Grizzlies are they're in a fight for that 2, 3, 4, 5 with the Lakers, the Nuggets, and the Rockets. But also, too, Jaren Jackson Jr. is 6 games away from being eligible for a Supermax contract extension. And you don't want that affected either, because obviously that makes it easier to retain him on the money that you want to pay him. Yeah. I don't like the TLDR to not hijack your podcast with the CBA or anything, but because of Jaren Jackson Jr.'s contract extension right now, like it's one of those things where they can only extend him like 40% or 30% off of the last year's contract, and still that number is relatively low related to market value. So you want that Supermax contract eligibility, so you could just give him the Supermax instead of being like, well, we got to do that. Or they traded Marcus Smart for Marvin Bagley and Johnny Davis so they could open up cap space to do the renegotiate and extend with Jaren Jackson Jr. So I'd rather him just get the Supermax. He's been an All-NBA, because that means he's been an All-NBA player, and he has been. And I would hate it if this stupid 65-game rule zapped that possibility from him.
Yeah, definitely agree. And I think a lot of the teams that are being proactive navigating the CBA will find success, right? So you guys have done a really good job cultivating homegrown talent. I feel like the Hawks are trying to do that same thing, getting cheaper contracts with guys in the G League. And so hopefully that gives you more bandwidth when you extend those Supermax contracts. I really want to take a look at the second quarter, because the second quarter saw 3 separate it was a 19-11 run to start the quarter for the Hawks. Then the Grizzlies went on a 15-7 run, and then the Hawks went on a 14-5 run. So I've talked a little bit like at the start of the podcast about how these teams somewhat have some similarities. And I think some of this is like from the Popovich tree to some extent, right? Like Taylor Jenkins, and then Quinn Snyder. These guys they were all coaches on Bud's staff on the 2013-2014 season, alongside, Darvin Ham, guys like that. And so I do think there are these similarities in the way that their teams play. One thing that really stuck at me, like I didn't realize Kennard had gotten this comfortable with the ball in his hands. Like, he was really, really good in this. So you see the screen from Edey, and I was always a big fan of this acquisition, because I wanted to see like the screening with all the Memphis guards and ball handlers. And from the Hawks' perspective, right, Niang didn't play, and George, when we acquired Niang, it basically put Garrison Matthews out the rotation, because he's a better shooter. He's less of a liability in terms of like on the glass and cross matching against bigs. Even if he doesn't necessarily have the mobility that Garrison Matthews does, right? So you can see that Garrison is trying to sink here a little bit unnecessarily. Like I think Capella and Trey have it sort of locked, and then Conchar, who's 11 for 15 against the Hawks in his career from 3, knocked that one down. And it was such a back and forth game. And I think what was really crazy to me, the Hawks started this game 0 for 8 from 3, right?
Yeah.
And they ended up finishing with 82 paint points, which is the 3rd most by any team this season. And I think a lot of that, of course, is Jaren not being on the floor.
Yep.
So in general, like we'll see here, Edey's able to move pretty well off this pick and roll. I think a lot of this is on Capella too. Like, when you have a less mobile big, the dive has to be quicker. Yeah. Because by standing here, he's just allowing Edey to stand and sort of contain this pick and roll. And then Capella doesn't have the vertical burst to finish through or draw foul here, right? Right. So how does the defense look without Jaren on the floor all season? And what did you think it looked like tonight?
Obviously tonight, I did not think it looked, I don't think it looked any good, just because, again, 80 paint points, but also too, this season, the Grizzlies, since February 1st, the Grizzlies have a net rating of 128.6 in second quarters, which is last in the league. So,
oh wow, that's weird. What do you think it is about that?
I know that's one of the things that's like, I was even telling somebody last night, it's like, defense is very complex very complex science to study compared to offense, right? Because you're also having to account for the complex offensive schemes on the other side. and there's just so many different quick moving parts behind it. But I mean, really, it's just kind of one of those things. Like, I think it all kind of starts at the point of attack. The point of attack hasn't been that great, and so when the point of attack isn't great, teams are getting downhill. When teams are getting downhill with the advantages created, that causes rotations, and when rotations are created, stuff's going to open up with the defense, and good playmakers are going to exploit that.
Right.
But also, too, I think the biggest thing, too, is points off turnovers. Like, the Grizzlies, they lead the league, or they're one of the league leaders in points off turnovers. And at the end of the day, when you talk about defense, you know what's going to make a defense look bad is when the offensive team could just create cycle opportunities, and they go out, create a turnover, and they just get baskets in transition. And it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like, it's easy to be like, oh, get back on defense. But also at the same time, sometimes the turnovers that are created, it kind of creates an advantage that's almost insurmountable for the team to overcome. Because even if guys get back, well, guess what? You have a guy get back, and now it's a 2-on-1. That's an advantage. It's almost like a power play in basketball. So that's been the biggest thing, is just that, you know, teams are kind of able. Like, for example, I thought for the most part, Trae Young is an all-star. And he is the most underrated star in the league. It baffles my mind.
Speak on it. Yep.
I need Trae to get more flowers, man. He's so good, man. He's wicked good, and it's a lot of the stuff with the Hawks is not his fault at all.
Yeah.
Granted, poor defender, but the rest of the offensive stuff's not his fault. But again, he's able to get downhill, and it's almost like there's some of this stuff where it's like, okay, I almost feel like, you know, kind of stay home a little bit on the perimeter defense, where it's like, hey, maybe like with Zaccharie, like if Trae's getting downhill and you just have that rotation over from Edey, he's big enough and long enough to where he can deflect the entry pass, or he can at least make that dump off pass harder. Whereas you're getting that rotation. So Zaccharie rotates downhill, and then now you have the opposite low guy tagging on, like, let's say Capella, and you leave over that leave open that corner three. You know, like, for one, you just got to win at the point of attack, and then, you know, if you win at the point of attack, then you kind of stop the snowball effect from there.
Yeah. And when you're talking about point of attack too, so here you have Trae on the floor, and I thought Wells would match him, honestly. I thought Wells would match him the whole game, pick him up full court. Here, what happens is, so Stevens was matched up against Risacher. Risacher comes to set the screen, he slips. Trae's able to get this pass between both of them, and he leads Risacher towards the basket. You get a collapse so Contra comes all the way from the top of the key.
Yeah.
And I think this is a good rotation. Terrence Mann has shot the ball really well from catch and shoot threes, but this is a good rotation here. Risacher is able to keep the ball away from him, then kick it out to Terrence Mann. Again, like, this is good defensive process. Now everyone's back matched up with their man, but you have a size disadvantage for a little bit. And Terrence Mann hits a tough shot, but these are the types of shots that break you. Right, yeah. Like this, again, that was good defensive process from you guys. You forced the kick out for the perimeter. Everyone gets back out to the man. Tough shot hit by Terrence Mann. But I think that also kind of goes back to, like, you have to put two on the ball against Trae there because you don't have Wells on the floor. And so I think that's the other challenge too. I don't remember if he was ever in foul trouble. I don't believe he was. But I think that I probably would have tried to match him as much as he could. And Luke Kennard he was annoyingly always around the ball. And I think, like, it's so valuable to have guys like this who are great shooters, but can also ball handle, can also just be in the right place at the right time. There were multiple times in this game where Kennard would pop up out of nowhere, offensive rebound, cut to the basket. And I'm not shoehorning Risacher per se, but I think, like, this type of stuff is his floor. You know what I mean? Where it's like just always being perpetually aware. So I know I gave him a little bit of a flowers earlier in the show, but I was just like, every time I felt like he was on the floor, like, the ball was just popping a little bit more. He was able to get to those offensive glass opportunities. So you guys ended up, I think, with 3 shot attempts on that possession. At some point, I'm pretty sure they were outpacing the Hawks in field goal attempts. Here was another nice shot from, and here's the thing too, like, we talked about how, you know, Trae can sometimes be a poor defender. He's taking a lot more initiative here, right? So Lamar Stevens probably gets this rebound.
Yep.
and Trey's able to knock it away from him. So, like, that's all I'm asking for him. I'm not asking you to go out there and be Gary Payton. I'm not asking you to be Jalen Wells, but give me a little bit of resistance. Like, try to be an impact player as much as you can. So, I've been very, very impressed with what he's done. Terrence Mann, too, like, this dude he's came to the Hawks, and I think, of Karis LeVert and Jordan Niang, I think most Hawks fans were familiar with their game, right? And then if they knew Terrence Mann, they probably knew him from the playoffs where he played against Utah. The ball handling has been really good. I love his aggression here. And so there's a bit of, especially with the way this switch happens, you see Trace pointing out Terrence Mann. So I think it's either a cross match in transition or they had ran a pick and roll. So Edie isn't on Clint anymore.
Yeah.
And so now the paint, again, with no Jaren Jackson, you see Edie's going to rise at that drive at the same time that Terrence Mann drives.
Right.
And it opens up the paint for him.
Yeah, because Ricochet's a pass over. So if he digs too close on the drive, then next thing you know, Ricochet has an open straightaway three. Ricochet had been shooting the ball well this game, and also KYP. He's been shooting like 50% from three in his last like 7 or 8.
Yep.
But two, Zaccharie doesn't have great recovery time. So like, it's not like he can, if there's a pass, he can zap out the perimeter. Like if Terrence Mann makes that pass over, that's a 3 for Ricochet because or he's gonna attack that closeout and Zaccharie can't even recover. Next thing you know, rotations are happening.
So as we continue to look through these clips, what was your feel for Zach like coming into the season? And like, do you think he's met your expectations? Has he exceeded them? What's been your feel on him?
For sure. I mean, with Zach,
Zach Edey was definitely someone in the draft process I came around more and more.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously, you hear this won't work in the NBA. And, teams are just going to put him in pick and roll and he's just tall. And I'm just like, all right, let me get this study for myself. And so then, I started listening to him and these draft combine interviews, and he goes, I just want to rebound, set screens, do whatever it takes to win. And he's like, I'd study guys like Zubac and Steven Adams and Jonas Valanciunas. And I'm like, oh, wait a minute. Like, because at first I'm like, okay, I have him top 20. So I'm like, okay, at the end of the day, like, he's going to stay in the league. Like, I'm not questioning that. And guys that stay in the league that offer elite skills are good players. And then when he said that about the players he studies, I'm like, a 7'4" version of those guys absolutely rocks. So I got moved into my lottery. I still had other players that I was higher on in their overall projection and ceiling for, but still I had Zach Edey as a lottery player. And, I think for the most part, like he has, there's, I wish there were some games where he wasn't played off the floor so easily. And it's mainly defense that kind of does that for Zach. But, I think for the most part, he's had some moments where the process is good and he has good moments of protecting the rim. Obviously, I think he's still working out the pick and roll dynamic with Ja. I think there's too many times. I think this is the thing that kind of like has not met my expectations is his hands aren't that great. Mainly catching passes and dump offs and stuff like that. But I think that's just the game processing. Like the game's fast, especially for a rookie big. Like it's fast, but he's from the beginning of the season. Like his post touch has kind of reverted back to his Purdue post touch, which is great. I think there's times in a pick and roll. The potency shows where it's like, okay, you throw it up to the 7'4" guy and he's going to make something happen out of it. The offensive rebounding, it's really cool because like you look at a lot of these graphs and it's like this season, it's like Steven Adams all the way up here, Chasm, Zach Edey, Chasm, everyone else. So he's already providing an elite skill as an offensive rebounder. And it just makes me very optimistic knowing that this is the worst that he's ever going to be. You know, and I don't know if that means all-star or anything, but at the end of the day, he doesn't need to be an all-star with the Grizzlies. Like he just needs to be, at the end of the day, he needs to just be an elite role player. Like he needs to be a Zubac or a Steve Adams, and maybe that comes with an all-star appearance one time. Yeah. Because at the end of the day,
he's a monster to deal with. And but yeah, I think for the most part he's met my expectations. I think one thing that kind of makes me feel better about Zach Edey and the Memphis Grizzlies projection is, the Grizzlies, they don't have to rely on Zach Edey to close games. You know what I mean? Because, and I think everyone this year before the season, everyone was like, oh, well, the Grizzlies may need a veteran center, kind of like how Lively had Gafford. Well, Lively didn't already have a Jaren Jackson Jr.
Yep.
And the Grizzlies' version of a Gafford is just having moments where it's like, okay, instead of Zach Edey, we're going to play Santi Aldama or Brandon Clark. Yep. And that's valuable where you have two guys that you can coming into the season is a little shaky just because you didn't know where Santi Aldama was going to be in a playoff, in a contending team context, and you didn't know how Brandon Clark was going to be post Achilles. And now I'm confident in both those guys playing and closing 25, 30 minutes a night in a playoff game.
Yeah. And I think for Edey too, I remember pre-draft, I was watching him in Summer League, seeing him set screen for Scottie Pippen. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I can just see this seamlessly translated for Ja. I could see it seamlessly translating for Desmond Bane. We saw what Steven Adams did for you guys, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I have comped him his ceiling in terms of like supercharged Steven Adams. Like, this is a guy with great post touch who's going to feast on the glass, incredibly physical. I did think there were moments where I was like, he didn't take advantage of his size. It was only two. Right. Two of his missed shots. It was like he didn't create enough space. He just kind of went up. But you saw it when he ran down the lane in the fourth quarter. It's like, okay, well, when he decides he's going to dunk, who's going to stop him? When he has that sort of a run. So I want to take a look at this clip too here, because I thought this was, first off, good pressure by you guys, which I think, I don't have the numbers on it, but I'm pretty sure you guys probably pick up full court more than anyone else.
Yeah, they pick up full court quite a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if Risacher was trying to nutmeg him. Honestly, looking at it again, I think
he was.
Which is a crazy play, but he does stuff like this pretty regularly. Like, he's gonna pull out something flashing. Now he tries to nutmeg him. He messes up. Bit of a hold here, so that was able to get him back into play. But I love the chase down effort, right?
Yeah.
And he got some ball here. He does have his hand on his hip.
Yeah.
But he refused to just let the mistake happen. You know what I mean? So
yeah.
I was cool with him fouling. I was cool with him, but I just love that he didn't just let it happen. I want to take a look at, so from the third, I think it was about 3 minutes to go in the fourth or something like that. Let's see. Get to that play. I'm going to have to just click through, unfortunately. I wish that this interface would actually let me do it. The Hawks went on a 11-3 run, I believe, or something like that, to close this out. Give me 1 second. Let me get that right for us here. And this was the first big run of the quarter that I felt like sort of like defined the rest of the game. So, like I said, basketball in general is a game of runs, but I thought this was the moment where the Hawks sort of like showed that they were going to be able to hang with you guys tonight. And give me 1 second. How have you felt about I think some teams, like when a team goes on a hot scoring run, they respond in different ways. Like for Memphis, with Jared on the floor, do you feel like it's more so like, okay, let's lock in defensively, or is it with the pace that you guys are playing, let's just go and get these points back? How would you generally feel about that?
That's a really good question. I think they kind of gravitate towards locking in on defense. Like I think the last couple games, like the message from the Grizzlies, whether it's Taylor Jenkins or the players, has been locking in on defense. It's not about like, oh, we gotta make up these points. Granted, they wish that, they obviously wish that they had better crunch time scoring, but I mean, at the end of the day, there's also like only so much you could do without Ja Morant and Jaren Jackson Jr. on the floor in those moments, and even to an extent, Santi Aldama. But no, I think it all kind of points back to the defense, because if you kind of look at the infrastructure of the Memphis Grizzlies over the past several years, or since Taylor Jenkins took over, is they've always trended towards being a a top defense. And I think this year, even if you look last year, the Memphis Grizzlies had 34 different players, but they were still 12th in defense. That says a lot. It says a lot about the kind of defense that they built. And I think this is definitely the weakest that the defense has looked in the Taylor Jenkins era. So I think it all kind of boils back to tightening up defensively, because if you tighten up defensively, that's gonna allow you, like you said, to kind of put points back on the board, because you're getting stops, and when you get stops, you control the pace, you can get out in transition, create advantages in transition offense, or generate a turnover cycle opportunity to where you're now the team that has the insurmountable advantage and an easy scoring chance in transition. That's Memphis. That's what kind of fuels the Memphis Grizzlies. And when the defense is bleeding as significantly as it is, you're not getting those stops. You're not controlling the pace, and the other team's gaining momentum. Like you said, momentum is a major driver in the NBA. I mean, we know how we've started to see in today's NBA, keeping a big lead is not as easy as it used to be. So
20-point leads are being blown more frequently than any other point in NBA history. Some of that is a 3-point shot. Some of that is teams committing to playing with pace. So I think this is a good example. You'll notice here that this is 22 seconds on the shot clock. You guys sprinted this up the floor, and this was after a made basket for the Hawks. And so you can see the cross match here. Kongwu. Now here's the benefit of having someone like Onyeka instead of Clay Capella on the floor. He's able to contain this drive relatively 100%. Easy, right? So that's a big asset for the Hawks. And then it felt like some of the after timeout, not after timeout, but like the sideline out of bounds stuff, there wasn't a ton of urgency from you guys in certain possessions. I feel like this one, you probably could have got a better shot with 60 seconds on the shot clock. Desmond's able to get the offensive rebound, and then Brandon Clark cuts through. Like, I think it's very smart basketball. The guys are constantly cutting. So here, Onyeka falls asleep a little bit on the glass. So he's just watching, and then Brandon Clark loops around out of his vision, which I think is really smart too. Like, he's not running right past him. He's curling around. He's able to get to the front of the rim and convert. So that was one of the first buckets, one of the only buckets you guys had at the stretch. And then the Hawks went on this run. And so you'll see, again, early post opportunity, good help from Brandon Clark. You probably want to get that ball even earlier to Onyeka, because here's the benefit, again, of running off of make.
Yep. You had to cross match.
You get the cross match, and then Onyeka's smart enough to be able to post. I would have got him the ball. Like, he needs to be ready here, right? He gets it to him pretty early. But because Karras is so deep, the help comes from Brandon Clark. I'm sure Onyeka felt him a little bit. Yeah. I think they called over the back here.
Mm-hmm.
Then you go back down after the offensive rebound. Hawks get another offensive possession. This is something that has been a new development this year. Like, Onyeka's always been a pretty good passer for a center, but Dyson is also equally gifted at like faking backdoor cuts. So they get this connection at least once a game. And so this is what I think is like a new look at the Hawks, right? When we had John Collins, DeAndre Hunter, Clint Capella, and Kevin Huerter in the starting lineup, there was not a ton of ball handling. Now, even though Dyson has picked up his dribble, watch how Onyeka comes to him, right? You don't want Capella doing that, and Capella also isn't doing that. And because he's able to come to him and release that pressure, Dyson's able to go backdoor. And what I've loved is Onyeka is throwing guys open. Like, Dyson's not open right now, but he throws the bounce pass and leads him. And then, like, Vince is, like you said, he's probably 6'6". You see how close his hand is.
Yeah.
Like, if that pass isn't perfect, it's not getting through. And then Dyson makes a crazy read, gets it through GG, and then you get it to Risacher open in the corner. So I think this is a really good possession to explain like why this is a different Hawks team. You see Jalen Wells is in full denial against Trey. But now you have Karras Levert as well, but like these guys are able to create without Trey's presence, even if Trey is pulling that defender out to the half court line. So I think that their sort of commitment to pace and then sort of being more connected defensively is what ultimately led to this run. I thought this just kind of got away from Vince here. I think this pass wasn't probably as open as he thought. I think he wanted to kind of wrap that through with a bounce.
Yeah, I think he was trying to thread the needle and be a little too flashy. Because hold up, like pause it right when the pass is made. Look, it's a no look. He's trying to manipulate and get the eyes towards Brandon Clark, who's in that dunker spot right there, which obviously is like seems like the sensible read to make. But in the process, he's not really looking at that passing window between Risacher and Young to Wells. because he's trying to manipulate towards the dunker spot.
Yeah.
And obviously when you have that and also too, the passing window between Risacher and Daniels is even smaller. And those two guys are big wings, and Dyson Daniels had generated deflections. Really, if there was a pass to be manipulated, it was to GG Jackson at the top, above the break, instead of trying to force that window to the corner, which obviously you want those corner threes, especially for Jalen Wells. But I feel like that was, or, whether it's maybe just not manipulate that pass, or you manipulate the corner and try to slip something to be Brandon Clark. That's probably, but also too, this play, I think it also kind of captures the defensive potential between the Atlanta Hawks, even in a Trae Young infrastructure. I thought last night, especially when you consider the fact that midway through the fourth quarter, it looked like they were going to give up 150 points to a Memphis Grizzlies team without Ja Morant or Jaren Jackson Jr. Like, the urgency wasn't there a whole lot. But I was sitting there talking to somebody who's like, they have Risacher, they have Daniels, they have Okongwu, Terrence Mann. There's no way they should be this bad defensively. And I think this play kind of captures it because, again, like I talked about earlier, you want to build with size and length around Trae Young because he's not a good defender and he's small. And I think this play kind of captures exactly. And then also now, too, they're relying on Okongwu over Capella, who's a little bit more dynamic defensively, can defend in space a whole lot better, can contain in space a whole lot better. But, I think good process by the Hawks, and they kind of exploited Vince Williams not necessarily making the right read there.
Yep, and this was almost a premonition of what was to come with the game winner too, right? So Dyson is not just so gifted with taking the ball; he throws really good lead passes. So you see, GG is still here, he's still ready to shoot, right?
Yeah,
Dyson's already thinking about getting it up.
But also too, look what I said about creating an insurmountable advantage. So I'll go right here. So Des is going for the 50-50 ball. Now you have Levert a step ahead of Jackson, and then Risacher running too. That's a 2-on-1 right there. Well, almost a 2-on-1, but essentially Risacher, GG Jackson did a good job making his presence felt in transition. But because they already had Risacher running out on the break, because he's not chasing the 50-50 ball, he's able to get the easy putback. That's that's what I mean. Sometimes the advantage when you turn the ball over, it's insurmountable to overcome because it's essentially a 2-on-1.
Yeah. Great point. And I think that's been a big point of emphasis for the Hawks this year too. They really want to get out and run as much as possible. They have multiple ball handlers for a reason. And so again, this is what I think is so fascinating about these teams. It's the same concept for you guys. the ball's on the basket, and you already have a numbers advantage, right? Because Jalen Wells is streaking up the floor.
Yeah.
Now it's 3v4. Mm-hmm. And I think Jalen with the D-cell, this dude is so good, man. This dude is so good. I don't know how you were on him pre-draft. I think I maybe had him 45 or 50. I don't remember exactly.
Yeah.
He has easily returned first round value. It's not even a question. This is first. I love when guys pull out interesting new layup counters. I love the extended step and then into the D cell. Let's Dyson fly by. That's nasty.
100%. Yeah, no, with Wells, I remember in the pre-draft, I remember even texting someone saying, I like Jalen Wells.
Yeah.
And I had him in my top 40. I think I had him 44, 45. But I also I told someone the other day, that's that doesn't reflect how that doesn't really reflect how much I like him. But also somebody would be like, oh, you only had him 44 or 45. But I'm like, okay. But the gap between him and 31 wasn't big. It's not like I had this big chasm between him in the early second round. I liked him. It's just when you're making a big board, it doesn't sometimes account for tiers. So it's oh, wow, there's this fat gap where really, when the Grizzlies drafted him at 39, I'm like, oh, I like that pick. It makes sense to me. There wasn't a guy on the board where I was like, I should have gotten that guy instead. And obviously no one has proven Like no one has proven that they should have taken that guy instead of Jalen Wells. It's actually kind of wild. Like no shade at the Hawks, but like the Grizzlies got Jalen Wells at 39 to do what Risacher is supposed to be doing for Atlanta, which is crazy. Like slowing down the opposing team's best player, being a 3-and-D wing. And, obviously everyone kind of points to the Grizzlies infrastructure, say, oh, can they rely on 2 rookies in their starting lineup to win? I think it kind of undersells Jalen Wells and Zaccharie, because I think it's also, too, it's not like they came into the season with the objective of starting Jalen Wells. He forced the Grizzlies' hand to start him because he was that good.
Yep.
They could have easily went back to Marcus Smart when he returned from injury in November, but they rolled with Jalen Wells because Jalen Wells was good and the Grizzlies were winning when he was starting.
And Jalen, he's 21, right?
He's 21, yeah.
Okay, so that's the thing too. Like I think some Hawks fans were talking about like, well, what's the difference between their trajectories? Like Wells and Risacher right now, they are fulfilling a similar role. I think like obviously when you're 6'10", you have a little bit more upside. I think some of Risacher's finishing, his shot mechanics, but by all means, Jalen Wells he's on like all defensive trajectory, at least in my opinion. He reminds me a little bit of like Tumani in terms of how tenacious he is, but he has such a great shooter stroke. You saw he's able to take advantage of mismatches tonight too. I want to talk a little bit more about the pace here because I know a lot of people complain about like the amount of points NBA offenses score, but it's just so hard to try and guard these dudes. Like Trae Young's already picked the ball up. Is Risacher open? No. He's throwing dudes open past very lengthy, disruptive defenders. Like this is just, it's a crazy pass and it's a great read by Risacher, and I love his basketball IQ because it's not like Vince is just he's not moving lackadaisically. He's just not sprinting. So again, like he sees that Vince has his back to him and he knows he can create passes by sprinting, and he knows that Trae's gonna get him the ball. And there's a reason why the Hawks are number 1 in shot quality this year. And a lot of that is because they put movement around him, and then like the ball is being handled by Trae. That was a weird step out from you guys. I think there's about 2 seconds on the shot clock here. Here you see some of the pick and roll stuff. So Edey isn't on the floor, but step up screen. The Hawks are really good at doing these slips. So Onyeka's going to slip. Jalen, I think this is a bit aggressive help from him.
Hold on, go back to that frame where it shows Trae's getting downhill.
Okay.
So this was exactly what I'm talking about with the rotations and staying home.
Yeah, I think this is aggressive from Jalen.
So
Jalen, go ahead.
Right, keep going. Right here, you have GG rotating and Wells rotating. You already have Clark here. Granted, GG may have the tag here, right? Right. I don't think Wells should be rotating.
Yeah.
Luke Kennard's doing a great job of staying home. In fact, I think if anybody rotated pretty hard, it should have been Luke, because Dyson Daniels, I think he didn't even shoot a 3-pointer yesterday. But look, Trae's just able to make that read like it's so easy, and Risacher capitalizes on it. But I think the shifts have been too drastic. But also, I think Brandon Clark had the drive, and I think you could have just had GG take the tag, and from there, who knows what happens. Trae could have kicked it to Karis Levert, calls an X out with Jalen Wells, and then GG Jackson having to close out on Risacher. You may still get that same shot, or you have Luke Kennard help a pass away on a non-shooter. Like, you could have done that too, because that would have shrunk the spacing of the court as well. So it's stuff like,
there's not a lot of good options against Trae, but definitely the option is not to leave Risacher, who again is hot, and then have 4 people crowding Trae. It's a testament to his respect as a scorer, I think. But it's definitely like a bit of an over rotation from you guys. I would definitely, there's probably a better way to play that. Here, like, I think this is a good look from Brandon Clark. I just think the pass is off a little bit. It was a good back cut by GG, especially with Trae as a low man and popping off his hands. Then the Hawks are going the other way, balls moving up the floor.
I think GG was a little bit too focused on making sure he scored the basket there, and I think he thought score before catch. And that's just what happened there.
And here you see some of that pace again. So, like, when you push it, cross matches, Brandon Clark is no longer on Onyeka Okongwu. Luke Kennard kind of swims the balls. And I don't blame him, like, 9 out of 10 times with that ball going that direction.
That's a rebound,
It's a rebound. And so Karis is able to get Onyeka open for the dunk. So you see, like, how, again, turnovers can sort of like snowball. But when two teams play this quickly, like this is why this game was so back and forth, because they're able to go back and like kind of like. Also, Jalen had a couple of threes go in and out like that. I thought were going down.
Yeah, and same with Kennard. Like Kennard had some of those threes that just kind of went in and out, but yeah, no. Both teams definitely know how to capitalize after a defensive miscue to get a quick offensive bucket. So
yeah, and so here's a miss off of GG. Onyeka snags that from Jalen, and then it's an immediate like Trey has always been this level of passer, but I think he just has so much trust in these guys on the open floor.
Yep.
So he's just able to get Dyson open. They're running already, right? So he got the shot up. I think I don't remember why Dyson was already down the floor. But Gigi was a shooter, so it has to be the first man back. Dyson ends up beating him down there. So at this point, the Hawks are up 8, 57 seconds left. This was great rotation, or great basketball from you guys. So Desmond's able to get it. He's getting I think we kind of came out on his own a little bit, but he's able to sort of draw Trey in with that pass before firing it to the corner right to the shooter's pocket and Jalen Wells' money. I thought that was a really pretty sequence. They just back and forth basketball, right? So then Trey's matched up against Luke. I think he ends up smoking that layup. And then now you guys are going that way again. Boom, 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 boom. And then I think this ends the quarter with no points.
yeah.
Before we take a quick look at the fourth quarter, I wanted to ask you about Desmond Bane. He had himself a game, career high free throw attempts, 35 points, triple-double. But he did not score in the fourth quarter. So I was curious from your perspective, how much of that do you think was like the Hawks' adjustment defensively, or did you just feel like he wasn't as aggressive?
I personally think he just ran out of gas. And also, too, like, Dyson Daniels, great defender. I think because like you can just kind of tell in some of those shots in the fourth quarter. I think Des just lost his legs. I think it's simple as that.
Yeah, and here's the thing about Dyson too, which I think, as much as I think he gets credit as a defender and all that, his conditioning is ridiculous. Okay, not only is he guarding the best player on the floor, in New Orleans he was never playing this many minutes. Now he's scaled up offensively and defensively. And I never really feel like he's tired. I think like in the overtime game when we played against New York, he was definitely a little bit gassed. Some of the games we played against Detroit, I think those are the only time guys have really dominated his matchup. He didn't guard Desmond the whole game, but Desmond definitely gave him a little bit of problems. I think guys who could be physical and get him in foul trouble are like the biggest thing, because sometimes he can gamble a little bit on the ball. So what we're looking at here, this is the fourth quarter run that sealed the game. The Hawks went on a 19-6 run. You pointed this out earlier in the pod. Grizzlies were up 11. Levert scored 12 points during this. The Hawks shot 8 for 11. The Grizzlies had 3 turnovers, and Desmond Bane went 0 for 4 with 2 turnovers. So that was really the deciding factor. So here you almost get a turnover. Dyson loses it. Kick out the Terrence Mann. He knocks a 3 down. So that's a big shot. Come back on this end. Now, here's the other interesting thing, too. During the fourth quarter, or during that particular run, the Hawks took sorry, I'm trying to pull it up. During the fourth quarter, you guys had I don't know why it's not pulling up. Okay, here it is. You guys took 11 jump shots. You only took 1 layup, 6 floaters, 1 dunk. So that's 4 makes that weren't jump shots, and it was 4 for 7. The Hawks made 4 layups, 4 floaters, 3 dunks. So they had 11 points, 11 buckets in the paint on 15 attempts, right? So I think the shot profiles were drastically different. And again, to your point, a lot of that is the turnovers, right? So here we see a tough jumper from Scottie Pippen Jr. He ends up getting it back, shoots it again. And then who else but Luke Kennard, right? So Luke Kennard was right there. He's able to get that rebound. But I think this is like the shot quality just wasn't the same for you guys in that fourth quarter. I think it kind of got baited a little bit into taking jumpers. Sometimes I think teams can get, I'm not sure if you felt this way too, but it kind of felt like there are times where teams can play like to not to lose versus to win, right?
Yep.
And so they're
I
trying
think
to
they get a little too conservative. Yeah.
Yeah, they're being conservative, and they're not playing that free-flowing, quick basketball that they typically do. This is a big drive. So also, like, I don't have the full possession. You guys did really good. I remember this possession particularly because the containing the drives. They're about 3-4 drives prior to this one, which is again ultimately how Scottie Pippen Jr. gets best against Dyson Daniels. Scotty's super competitive. I've always thought he's a gritty defender, but there's a size advantage here for Dyson. He's able to step through and finish over him, over Bane. Here you see how much slower they're playing than they typically do. And I think it ends up being a foul. I think a lot of teams do this. I don't think I think the Hawks are just as prone to it. But now see when the shot is coming, right? It's 3 seconds on the shot clock. The only thing Desmond can do is step back. Right. As opposed to if you're sort of playing a little bit more within the flow. And I know, this is what teams do, but the issue is when teams are so much more, when they're playing so much faster than you, this is when I think it gets problematic. So Dyson did a really good job pushing the pace. So Trey, he's commanding attention from Scotty here. No one's matched up with Dyson at this point, and now it opens up that lane for Karras, right? So I think it's really tough for teams to find that sort of balance. Like, okay, we want to run clock, but we also want to generate good shots. And I think that ultimately is what came down to Memphis not being able to execute as cleanly down the stretch. But man, Luke Kennard, man, he's been, first of all, I didn't know this, and I consider myself pretty well versed in the NBA. I didn't know he's the all-time leader at 3-point percentage. But the fact that he's able to drive closeouts like this and throw passes like this while being that level of shooter.
Yeah, wait. Yeah, show that. I was actually just watching that one because I'm like, I gotta find this because I even saw this in real time. I was like, yo, this is a really good ATO here.
Yeah. So he's gonna drive right past Okongwu, and then he's the first to fake to get Levert in the air, and then dishing it between 3 Hawks. That's a really high level pass, and then a great finish from Vince too. You guys went up 7 4 minutes ago. Still a little bit of measure of control. Yeah, Hawks are pushing it. Here you see a crazy layup from Levert.
Yeah, some plays where you're like, okay, man, that's just that's just all. That's just NBA players being good at good players. Like that, you can't help that.
So Karras has not been great this year around the rim, but he's still super skilled. So I have seen him hit shots like that in the Hawks. I've seen him do it in the Cavs and Brooklyn uniform too. But that was definitely a tough shot. Again, look at where the shot clock is. It's 6 seconds on the shot clock, and Bane touches it with 4.8. He has to shoot this, right? Yeah. So I think that was a big part of it. The Hawks defense was better at staying true and not allowing those early breakdowns, and then they were able to push it. Here's another great example of Dyson getting downhill. That's a nasty move. He has been really good with this sort of change of pace crossover. So he's able to crossover, get past Kennard, and then as soon as he gets him off balance, he's going to spin off his shoulder. Yeah. And Brandon has to help, and there's no one else on the glass. 3-point game, 3 minutes to go.
So you want to hear a fun fact here? So I was just curious, decided to look it up. In 13 games against the Memphis Grizzlies, Caris LeVert averages 21.2 points on 52.5, 42.5, and 76.9 shooting splits. The next highest scoring average he has against another team is 17.5 against the Clippers. The Grizzlies are the only team that Caris LeVert shoots 50% against. So he's just a natural Grizz killer, dude. This is for his career. This is dating back to Brooklyn and everything. This dude's just a natural Grizz killer.
I think I find that so funny because you're absolutely right. But a lot of fans, I think, we sort of just equate anyone that has an outlier game being a Hawks killer. But we have our killers too. There's a lot of dudes who seem to have their best games against us. And I think that's some of the best part about the NBA though. Obviously, it's not fun when it's against your team, but I love when dudes have a personal vendetta. I don't know what you guys did to him, but for whatever reason, he seems to play really well against you guys. Again, look at the shot clock.
Yeah,
I'm not surprised he hit I'm not surprised he hit the side of the backboard here. It's just there's nothing else to do.
Quarter 3
shot clock.
Dyson Daniels right there.
Yep. And then you see him again.
He's already running.
He's already running because he knows that if you run with Trey, he's going to find you. And even if he doesn't pass it, that intrinsic advantage from Dyson running, look at how everyone else is trying to get back, and now opens up Terrence Mann for that lead pass, right? So now Mann isn't paying attention. And this is a cardinal sin. He's looking at Trey, and then he turns his head, and it goes out. So I was that's the worst timing you could ever do that. So here, I think this is the dunk for Edie.
Yep.
So there you see the power. You see his screening ability. And for the Hawks who don't have Jalen Johnson, right, like there's no other size on the floor. So
Yep.
very good take from Edie. Grizz up 5, 2 minutes ago. Screen comes from Onyeka Okongwu. Ball pops around. Karras knocks his shot down. And he was on a heater. He's the first bench player this season to score at least 15 points in the fourth with a block and a steal.
That's crazy.
In the last 25-ish seasons, there's only been 4 other players that do that off the bench. Like I said, Desmond pretty much exclusively shot jumpers. Gets great separation here, but I think that's also like looks like Dyson is flying. So I don't even know how much like visibility he had on the rim here. Still a good closeout. Ball pops around. They end up calling this an offensive foul, I believe, right?
Yeah, it was challenged and
it and it became an offensive foul.
Yep.
I think it's this one was tough because it's like he kind of does jump into the trade, but also Trey was just there. So it's like I don't know what else. I don't know. Interesting call. Obviously happy win in our favor.
Yeah.
But then Hawks get the ball. Now it's a 2-point game. Karras is gonna go to work.
Yep.
This is also a ridiculous shot. He goes up on the right side of the basket, essentially, or in the middle, and then he switches hands to get around Edie. Tough finish.
That's
tough
a tough finish.
He is a tough shot. He's a tough shot taker. He's not always a tough shot maker, especially by the metrics this season. But yeah, then we're going to see, again, look at the shot clock.
Yeah.
Turnover from Bane, 5 seconds. Now the Hawks have the ball. This is that possession you're talking about where Edie comes over.
Yeah.
This is where I think the spacing probably could have been a little bit better. You don't want Edie to be able to come over and help. Also, trade needs to go up earlier here just because.
Yeah, he had that floater right before he got there.
He has a floater. He brought it too deep. He did hit a floater over Edie, but here you 7-4 wins against things like this, right? So,
yep.
Did a great defensive rebound. Game's tied 130, 57 seconds on the shot clock. I believe it was a timeout.
There was a foul, yeah.
Or foul, yeah. So Luke Kennard drew 5 fouls last night, which was pretty big. I don't know like why the ball is. It's just I don't know, man. Like the ball comes to Vince with 5 seconds on the shot clock.
Hold on. Look at the cross match. Look at Edie.
Yep.
Like there's some of these moments where it's like, granted, I would like to categorize myself as a new school basketball watcher where I love the modern NBA. I love where it goes and stuff like that. But there's just some times where it's like, dude, just give the ball to the big dude in the post. Because everyone's all like advantage creation, like the idea that advantage creation is like beating a closeout or taking your man off the dribble. Sometimes the advantage that you create is having a big ass dude in the middle of the paint who can score over a guy that's insanely smaller than him. Like,
yeah.
Which granted, Man does a good job denying and making that entry pass hard because I think Edie can only really he has that hook. Look, he has that little hook on that arm.
Yeah.
Man. And then from there, like Edie can't really get to the rebound either because he is hooked.
Yeah.
Which again, it's one of those I appreciate the refs just like letting basketball be basketball, but God, that's kind of a foul. But
yeah, I thought this shot was down.
Yeah, that's again overhelp. Like, yeah, it's overhelp. You already have Vince at the hip, and you have Edie at center field. You didn't need Dez playing into the gaps that deep.
Yeah,
you know. So I think Edie Mm-hmm. So that was a little dicey for sure. And then they decided not to call a timeout. And next thing you know, right. And so I see what the Grizzlies were trying to do there. They're trying to get a stack action to see if they can free up the screen. Frankly, just sit right here real quick. Here's where they should have had it. I think Luke's in the right spot. You could have had him in the corner. But the screens that you should have had Jalen Wells in the opposite corner. I think they probably should have had Edie at that high ball screen, and then the stack should have been with Vince to see if you can get that switch with Trey.
Yeah.
Which, again, but also, too, it's tough because, like, you want to go against a unset defense in these situations. I think there's also – somebody said this to me yesterday, and it's like kind of thought about it. I think there's this almost a boogeyman a little bit with these timeouts because there was this time earlier in the season
Oh
where
yeah.
Desmond Bane hit a 3, but they had called a timeout, and then you weren't able to get that look. It would have taken the lead, and I think from there they just kind of let it play out. But if you're trying to utilize screens to get Dyson off of Des, you're trying to create an advantage, right? And I think that advantage and that mismatch that you're trying to create involves Trey, not Karis Levert, or even if the switch is coming from the second screeners, man, you're getting switched onto Okongwu, who has the size to contain the drive. You should have had that stack be with Edie than Vince, because you could have gotten that initial screen contact from Edie, and then could have gotten the stack with Vince, who now it makes Trey the lowest man out on the floor defensively, because look how high up everyone is. And I get it, because man can't leave Kennard. Baines, it's high up top. Like from there, like Trey would have been the lowest man, and it would have brought Okongwu all the way out to the top of the key. And also too, again, Dyson Daniels is all first team all defensive player. He could have just navigated that screen regardless and still gotten that same outcome. But I don't know, man. But also too, I look down at the ticker and it's like there's 2 timeouts where it's like, go like a few seconds. Go like, can you go like a few seconds? Maybe once. Hold on, go a couple more. Maybe right here where it looks like Dyson is going to navigate these screens, and you're not. And guess what? You're not even getting that initial screen contact from Edie. It's that it's a stack. Like if you're going to try to create a ball screener there, make Zach Edie that high ball screener. Once Dyson navigated that screen, and it looked like dead. Because look at that. You have Okongwu that can attack the gap. You have Terrence Mann that can attack the gap as well. Call a timeout. I know at the end of the day, it's like, oh, well, they could have just gotten Trey off the floor. You weren't going to create a good look from that because of that spacing. You have an overload on the side at which Desmond Bane's trying to create. And 2 defenders ready to help in the gaps, and just a downright nasty point of attack defender on him. You should have called a timeout to generate a different look.
If you're going to go, like to your point, the traditional stack alignment is you start with the big as a screener and the back screen is a guard. And the reason for that is because when the back screen is a guard, they can then pop and you bring another guard into the action. And so with Edie not being the initial screener, you lose the screening advantage, and then you also lose the surprise element from Wells popping or bringing Trey into the action if it's Spencer Williams. So I think that's a really good assessment. And it is a gamble necessarily because if you call a timeout here, Trey's coming off the floor. So that's one less pressure point you can't attack. But if you're not going to attack him, then call the timeout. And I think it's easier, like it's loud in the building. I'd imagine that they go through in the game scenarios all the time, right? So not giving them excuse necessarily, but at this point,
also too, like let's take away the whole ball screen element here. If they had Edie and Vince in the stack action, you would have Jalen Wells and Luke Kennard in the corners, where if there's any help coming off a Desmond Bane drive, like let's say you do get that advantage and now Trey is the one that's having to rotate. If that causes another rotation to help, you'll have Luke Kennard or Jalen Wells open in the corner with a clean look to seal the game.
I think it's in like, I mean, obviously we could say hindsight is 2020, but from a schematic perspective, this was not the best look they could have pulled out on the floor for sure. And as soon as Dyson is able to get his hand on the ball, and with the angle that Bane was going, like this is bottled up the whole time. And here's how quickly Dyson processes the game. The ball that he just got the ball, his eyes are up. Karis again trusting that he's going to be able to find him. Karis gets ahead, perfect lead pass. Wells is able to be that first resistance, doesn't want to foul. Here comes Vince. Tough layup. And I think it's and what I think is so, like I said it earlier, was like we saw a sequence just like that earlier in the game. Dyson gets a steal, throws it up ahead. I was definitely super hyped. I don't want to keep you too long, Parker, and I definitely appreciate you walking through those plays with me because I think, especially when I think about from from the Grizzlies perspective, I wasn't thinking about that sort of alignment that you guys had on that last play. But I do want to ask you one last question. Is Ja Morant related? I didn't know he hasn't played 5 straight games all season. And I think a lot of the reason why we're seeing this growth from Jaren and Bane was because they played so long without him in the previous season. They are building this offense to be less reliant on him. And I think some of that's availability and some of that is predictability. So I talked with, when Taylor came to, when Coach Jenkins came to Atlanta, I asked him about that, like, how do you find that balance, right? Because still Ja's a dynamic pick and roll creator. He's still in the end of games. He's a guy who has the ball in his hands, but he wants to be able to play different ways. So just in general, what's your read on like the offense building to be less reliant on Ja? Do you still feel confident about him sort of finding his groove? Because I do think it's been a little bit tough for him. Like you want to make sure your guys are still getting looks, but for example, I feel like he's taking a little bit too many threes. Like he's been averaging 6 or 7 threes over the last 5 games, and he's shooting 18%. It doesn't, the catch and shoot threes haven't looked great for him. So what's your feel and your read on his comfortability in the new offense? Like, how do you feel about that translating to the playoffs, and like, what's your overall thoughts?
I think the comfortability standpoint is just the fact that he's not playing consistent games. He's not stringing together 10, 15 games. I think he played 5 games in a row recently, but then he's out. Like, he hasn't played more than 5 games in a row since the 22-23 season.
Gotcha. More than 5. Okay.
Yeah. Well, it was 5, but now it's more than 5. He hasn't played more than 5 games in a row since 22-23. Obviously, yeah, they were trying to create an offense that not like I wouldn't say less reliant on Ja, but they wanted an offense that has a little bit more unpredictability, but also too not only cater to the strengths of Ja Morant, but also cater to the strengths of Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane, but also too create more unpredictability, because now instead of just like, okay, well, lock in on this high pick and roll and lock in on Jaren Jackson Jr. and Desmond Bane, that's our defensive game plan. Get to account for all 5 guys on the floor. Obviously, it's led to guys like Santi Aldama becoming a real potent offensive weapon. You have guys like Luke Kennard, who are showing that he's more than a shooter, can attack closeouts and make plays off the bounce. You have guys like Scottie Pippen Jr. pushing the pace. Jalen Wells showing some of this like sweet decel stuff. And I think with Ja, like obviously, like he's not running that high pick and roll. It's a little bit of adjustment. But I also, some of these I wrote about it this week. Is I think this could tap into his passing really well, but also too, like putting him in different spots adds to your potency, to where like sometimes it's like he's that next action where he's attacking a tilted defense, or they also have these actions where they have him attacking in an empty corner, which just kind of gives him more spacing instead of that high pick and roll. Because if you put him in the high pick and roll, yes, we've seen how potent that could be for the Memphis Grizzlies, but you're also bringing in on either side, there's going to be a gap defender that can easily help. Whereas in an empty corner, especially if he's driving towards the empty corner, he's not getting that extra help on his drive, the hand that he's dribbling in. So I personally think the offense can make him even more potent than people. I know people just want to go at the high pick and roll when the Grizzlies had a bottom 10 half court offense anyways, but I think it's more about the string of games and not being able to like consistently get those games. You know, at the end of the day, it's injuries, and it's stuff that we see him get injured. It's not one of these phantom things where you're like, wait, why is he out for 3 weeks with a knee injury? We didn't see that. You know, we saw him get cracked on a screen. We saw him get taken out in midair on an alley-oop. Like, we saw that stuff, you know? So, but yeah, it's more tied to that.
So the interesting thing is he's at a similar run frequency throughout the rest of his career. But he's currently shooting 59%, which is the second lowest of his career. And he's also taken the most shots per 100 possessions out of finishing scenarios, so not creation. Last season, season prior, he was around 20 per 100. This season is at 12.6. And he's at a career high 12.1 finishes attempts. So I think one thing that sets him apart, of course, the athleticism, the firm finishing ability. So I do think, you know, as he finds more comfortability, we could see if that translates better. And then, of course, he's still going to be able to call his own number. He hit big shots in these clutch games that ended up being losses, but I think you can see how the offense can tilt, right? So if Jaren doesn't have that post up, then it's like, okay, we'll kick it out the Ja. Or Desmond doesn't see that immediate pull up 3, let's kick it to Ja, and then we'll flow into something else. So I think the variability and unpredictability is really important. A lot of these pick and roll heavy offenses have really suffered in the playoffs. So I'm definitely a proponent of the system. I just hope he gets enough time to figure it out, figure out his sort of his flow before the playoffs start, because I think you guys are honestly going to be one of the most intriguing teams in the playoffs. Like, I think it depends on the seeding, but I think you can give anyone but OKC like a ton of problems. I would love to see, like, I think you and Houston would be a lot of fun. It'd be a knuckleball series. It'd be really fun to watch, and you get that Dylan Brooks factor too. But yeah, Parker, I really appreciate you. Could you please let the people know where to find your work?
Yeah, so just if you go to my Twitter or X at @Paco_Flockley, you'll find everything. You'll find my Substack Elitist. It's a free Memphis Grizzlies NBA draft Substack. If you choose to become a paid subscriber, there's no paywall or anything. It's just a donation to St. Jude Children's Research Hospital every month for my wife, who's been battling cancer for 12 years. And but yeah, I appreciate you having me on. One thing I gotta say before we close the show, I think it's super cool that we both have hometown legends framed in our you have the Joe John. Oh, you got the Neat too.
And the Neat. Yeah.
Nice. I got the Mike Conley right here. So obviously once I get more space, I'll find a way to get another one up here. But yeah, I appreciate you having me on, Dave. This is a lot of fun.
For sure, bro. And you guys, please make sure to check out his work. He does great work. Go support his wife. Send his strength and prayers to her as well. And yeah, I hope you all enjoyed. We'll see you on the next one. And y'all be safe.